Welcome to Cornell Keynotes. Today we are going to learn about and taste wines from France's Loire Valley. And joining us once again is wine educator and my friend Cheryl Stanley, who is senior lecturer at the Nolan School for Hotel Administration at Cornell. Great to have you in the studio again.
Thank you, Chris. Excited to be here.
This is our 5th wine tasting together. Can you believe it?
My gosh, it's been 5? I love it.
We're hitting number 5 here. And for those previous keynotes, if you are interested in seeing more of Cheryl and I, we will share some URLs in the chat with you so you can catch up on some of those previous keynotes. But we haven't covered what we're going to be covering today, which is the Loire Valley. So we're going to be tasting some wines. We're going to share also a few free downloads of course materials from Cheryl's online wine courses. You'll see a couple maps in a couple minutes. You'll receive instruction on how to read properly French wine labels like we're going to be talking about here today. In addition to learning a little bit more about appellations and some other really important things that are related to what we're going to be talking about today, Loire Valley wines. So we're also going to take your questions as well. So if you want to drop those in the chat, I'll get them here on my iPad and I'll kick them over to Cheryl in the order that they come in. So Cheryl, I want to set us up a little bit. You're a wine educator. You teach classes at Cornell University, large classes. Tell us a little bit about who your students are and what kind of knowledge you impart for them. How do they apply what they've learned at Cornell University?
So the Introduction to Wines course is open to the entire university, and it's a wonderful snapshot of students that might be pre-law, pre-med, business, engineering, you name it, they're in the course. Because really my goal in that class is to give people the tools to be able to talk about wine. Whether they choose to drink it or not, that's up to them, or taste in class, but it's really just the life skills, giving them a seat at the table.
You're also faculty author for several online courses and certificate programs available through Cornell and Cornell University. Tell us a little about who your students are there. Who should take some of these online courses?
So the wines courses through Cornell are open for professionals who are looking just to refresh their knowledge, but also just the general consumer. Maybe you're going on a trip to the Loire Valley this summer and you're looking to learn more about the wines of France before heading out on your trip. This is a great place to start.
So I imagine whether it's your undergrad students or your online students, there's a certain level of intimidation that comes with wine. Right? We all know about this. This is a well-established thing. It's for snobs or it's inaccessible to me. What do you say to those people when they're entering either your in-person class at Cornell or your online courses? How do you address this?
I say there is a wine for everyone. And yes, it can be intimidating. And we'll talk a little bit about that, especially with labels, right? And no one wants to appear stupid or not know what they're talking about. And I really approach wine with you're going on a journey and you're starting your journey, and everyone has to start from somewhere. And so just taking that first step is going to open up so many things to the world of wine.
All right, let's baseline this conversation. Let's get into a little map work here. Situate the Loire Valley for us in France and its relation to some of the more well-known established regions, Bordeaux and Burgundy, for instance. So let's look at this map and tell us what we're looking at here.
So if we're looking at the map, the Loire Valley is located in northwestern France. It's kind of the southern part of the northwestern quadrant of the country, and it's located along the Loire River. We're talking, depending on where you are in the Loire Valley, 2.5 to say 4 hours from a drive from Paris.
What's going on temperature climatologically there as it relates to some of the other regions? This is kind of a little bit more of a cold climate region, yes?
It is more of a cool climate because we are farther north, and we do have influence of the cool Atlantic Ocean in the far western part of the area, in Nantes with the AOCs of Muscadet and other ones there. And then the further you move inland, you have much more of a continental influence, so more changes in the diurnal temperature between highs and lows for every day.
Let's talk about terroir as it relates to wine. First of all, what is terroir?
Good question. I like to describe terroir as a sense of place.
Okay.
It is the term that the French use to truly give you a snapshot of that area. It's the soil, it's the climatic conditions, even including aspect to the sun, right? And
Yes.
every wine where it's from represents its place. And so there are so many different places within the Loire Valley, and it's influenced so much by that Loire River, with the Loire River starting in the Massif Central, and so in the heart and the center of France, and then flowing north and taking a left-hand turn flowing out to the Atlantic Ocean. So many people think, oh, Loire River, it's flowing in from the Atlantic. Nope, it's actually flowing out. So if you think about opportunities to extend hang time, right? Because this river, as the water warms during the growing season, here you have the ambient temperature of the vineyards can actually change.
I was going to ask you, so topographically, what's going on there, and how does that influence, the temperature in terroir and everything that kind of happens with that? What does it look like? Paint a picture for us.
So you have the main river. You also have a lot of tributaries coming off of it, and those tributaries can, similar to the larger river, make some impacts into ambient temperature. You also have some rolling hills too, which can, again, as I was talking about, maximizing sun exposure, because in cool climates, you want that to happen.
Yeah.
And it's just this beautiful, it's hard to describe, but it's just such a beautiful location, because you have so much agriculture there, including wineries, including history. You have the big chateau, right? Chenin and Chambord. And it's a great place to go bike riding, and just these rolling hills and not like big hills, but just these beautiful smooth hills. And then you also have outcroppings too of limestone, which we'll be talking about a little bit later.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit about that. So what kind of soil composition are we talking about in the Loire Valley?
So you have different types of soil, right? Because it is a larger area.
Yeah.
A lot of limestone, and in Vouvray we talk about tuffeau, which is a unique soil type, unique type of limestone. And then in farther eastern areas, in Sancerre, we talk about Kimmeridgian chalk and this white soil, which we also see in other parts of France and even the White Cliffs of Dover.
So to set us up ahead of our tasting, let's talk about the varietals that can be found in the Loire Valley. We're going to be, tell us a little bit about the grapes. And I should mention that we're going to be trying 5 wines here. Let's talk a little bit about the grapes that we're going to be presenting and tasting for today.
I like to break the Loire Valley into 3 buckets.
Okay.
I think it makes it a little bit more approachable. And in the far western area, so we're going to move from west to east, you have Muscadet. Muscadet is an area within, or kind of, it's in Nantes, but Muscadet AOC, and there's several other AOCs associated with it. When I say AOC, I mean Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée, controlled designation of origin. And then in that area, they grow Melon de Bourgogne. But what is interesting is that Melon de Bourgogne is also known as Muscadet in the west. And then in the central part of the Loire Valley, Anjou, Saumur, and Touraine, there we see, for white grape varieties, Chenin blanc. That is the star of this area. For red grape varieties, it's going to be Cabernet Franc. Now, there are a lot of other grape varieties that are approved, especially for reds, but we focus on those 2 as the main ones. And then in the eastern part, which some people in the wine world call it as the central Loire Valley because it is so far east, and yes, it's kind of the halfway point of the river, but I like to associate it as the eastern part of the growing of the wine-producing areas. There we focus on the white grape variety Sauvignon Blanc and the Pinot Noir for the red.
Good. So for our viewers, we've kicked up a map that you can check out, which is also available for download as well. So heads up in the chat for the URL on that. Now getting to the wines, you had discussed the varietals among the 3 sort of big regions within there, but these wines aren't called they're not named after the grape itself, right? They have the AOC that you discussed. Talk about that a little bit more so we can understand it.
And that's what's confusing for so many wine consumers, and especially those that are starting their wine journey, because they label by place. And you don't see the grape variety on the label. You'll see Sancerre AOC or Vouvray AOC. And as a consumer, you have to know, oh, Vouvray is Chenin Blanc, Sancerre is Sauvignon Blanc. And that can be very intimidating for others.
So tool takeaway time. Again, yet another download for you. In kind of demystifying the wine labels, this tool should help you to understand what we're going to be talking about going forward, especially when you're checking out the bottle cam. When we cut to that from time to time, you'll see that in the case of Vouvray, that's the most prominent information that is on the bottle because it represents the region in which it was grown.
Exactly.
Perfect. Good. Okay, we're going to start tasting.
Phenomenal.
Sauvignon Blanc is huge. It's globally well known. It's grown all over the world, and it figures very prominently in wines from the Loire, as you had mentioned earlier. Talk about Sauvignon Blanc and the different forms that it can come in and what we're going to be hitting today.
Well, the Eastern Loire Valley is a benchmark for the grape variety Sauvignon Blanc, and it's so well respected. It grows so well in this area because of the climatic conditions, because of the soil type. And, there's some people say, oh, Sancerre is a grape. No, Sancerre is a place. Sauvignon Blanc is the grape variety. And, Sauvignon Blanc and especially Sancerre is even so popular that it was mentioned in Emily in Paris season 1 as, oh, don't worry, Sancerre is a breakfast wine.
Is it?
Well... Moderation.
Sure. Okay, good. So Sancerre is red hot right now.
Yes.
Elevated prices, a little bit inflated. What's going on? Why is it
Supply and demand. I mean, pure economics. People love drinking Sancerre. White wine consumption is actually up over red wine. Mm-hmm. And we see this in all parts of the world, actually. Whites are, sales have... I mean, we can talk larger wine in general, but white wines are becoming much more popular in the market. And with Sancerre being such a benchmark, producing these fresh, high-acid wines made from Sauvignon Blanc, a grape variety that people know from New Zealand or California or even other parts of France like Bordeaux, that it's just a great wine.
So if you're looking at a bottle of Sancerre and you want an alternative, we brought one in today. What are we going to be drinking?
Yes, so we are trying a Menetou Salon.
Okay.
And this is an AOC for Sauvignon Blanc that to me is incredible value, and it's a wonderful way if you don't want to pay the price point for a Sancerre to experience an Eastern Loire Valley Sauvignon Blanc.
Probably save $5, $6, $7 at least on.
Yes, and in terms of production, I mean, Sancerre is the largest producing AOC in the Eastern Loire Valley, but Menetou Salon, Quincy, or looks like Quincy, or even Pouilly-Fumé are all great alternatives to it. And with Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley as well, it's not an AOC, but it's actually at the regional level. It's IGP, or Indication Géographique Protégée Val de Loire, Sauvignon Blanc, becoming more prominent in the market because of its popularity. And, again, another alternative for Sancerre.
Right, another great buying tip. Okay, let's get into it. Would you sip first? Because I want to tell the audience real quick what we're going to be drinking. Let's cut to the bottle cam, please. So this is a Menetou Salon, Isabelle et Pierre Clément, 2023. This one retails for $24 compared to the, as discussed, the 35-ish, priced Sancerre. So let's check this one out.
And on the nose, this wine is very fresh. I smell it. I get Gala apple. And people say, oh, well, Sauvignon Blanc has this grassy minerality to it. This wine does have grassy minerality, but it also has this beautiful ripeness, this freshness in the nose.
I love it quite a bit. Now, when we talk about those white, limey kind of soils, is that reflected in this?
Oh, there's a lot of conversation in the world of wine about can you actually taste minerality?
We did a whole thing on this, yeah. Yep.
But to me, there is this, you're licking rocks. Yep. And I don't say that in a bad way in any way. No, but there is, it's kind of like a flintiness almost, and just such bright acidity that's lime. Like you're getting so much citrus and lime from this wine.
A lot of citrus.
I mean, this wine as an aperitif, right, to get your gastric juices going, thumbs up, but also just with food. I mean, this wine craves food.
That's absolutely delicious. I love that one. Very good. We're going to move into Vouvray. Get moving right along. Tell us a little bit about Vouvray. We talked about it being a place. What kind of grape is it? What's the wine drinking experience? How popular is it, et cetera?
So Vouvray for Chenin Blanc AOCs in the central part of the Loire Valley is the largest AOC for Chenin Blanc. And what is unique about Vouvray is there's certain terminology that you will see on a label, such as sec, meaning dry, demi-sec, meaning half dry, milieu, which is a little bit more sweet. But then you can also see labels that just say Vouvray AOC. And this wine comes in so many different styles. Should we taste it?
I think we should.
Okay.
Let me ask you before we go,
Yeah.
what's the alcohol percentage in this? Residual sugar kind of situation. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the alcohol's usually 12.5 to 13.5% alcohol.
Okay.
You can, right, there are some producers that choose not to use the dryness levels on their wines. So you have to know a little bit more about the producer and the style of wine that they make.
Okay.
Right. So this particular producer is Champalou. It's a wine that I have served many times in the Introduction to Wines course. It also has a Cornell connection with Anthony Lynch. It's imported into the United States by Kermit Lynch. Kermit Lynch's son, Anthony, is a Cornellian Arts and Sciences, class of 12. Mm-hmm. But I love this wine because it's so approachable. It's a great first, you want to try Chenin Blanc and you haven't had it from the Loire Valley. This is a wine that you can go to and see that style.
This is the Chenin Blanc. Let's compare and contrast it a little bit to the wine that just came before, right? We had highlighted some citrus components, maybe had a small debate about minerality and its our ability to perceive it and so on. This is a different wine. This is a different grape, Chenin Blanc.
It is. And the Manitou Salon with the Sauvignon Blanc, very linear acidity. Like it went into the mouth and just kind of zipped right through. Whereas when this Chenin Blanc comes onto the palate and comes in the mouth, it's so much rounder, right? The texture is very different. And instead of being that searing lime, you have more apples, you have pears, a little bit more flower to the wine, a floral component. And, whenever I drink Vouvray, we talked about the soil in the Loire Valley, this tuffeau soil that is so famous in Vouvray. I mean, people have actually built homes into the soil and have the vines growing on as the roof. But that's where they cellar their wines. And it has this wet stone. I don't want to say musty because we associate musty as being a wine fault, but it has this wet stone-like character to it, different than the flinty flintiness in the Sauvignon Blanc.
So if we're thinking about big picture, we're thinking about the Loire Valley. Chenin Blanc can come in many forms because it's so prominent. It can really swing from dry to sweet, kind of like you mentioned. Other things we need to look about. So are there any other types of Chenin Blancs, any other appellations that we should be kind of heads up for?
So you can also get sparkling.
Yes.
So Chenin Blanc is the approved grape variety in several AOCs for sparkling wines.
Got it.
And other AOCs, I love to do a comparison of Sauvignon to Vouvray. Sauvignon, primarily in the market are going to be bone dry styles. And it's a different expression to this. You can also find Chenin Blanc that have had botrytis, which is that noble rot, because you have the misty mornings from those tributaries and then the dry, breezy afternoons. So it's the perfect location for that noble rot development. So you can get the very, very sweet style of wines. And you can even see late harvest wines as well.
Can we dive into noble rot? We didn't really kind of... it's not in our script, but talk about it a little bit. Botrytis, what are these things, and how do not only vineyard managers concern themselves with it, but how do we think about it as consumers, perceiving it?
Well,
Why is it noble?
because this rot, right? Before it's gone black rot, bad.
And this is approaching harvest time.
Approaching
phenomena.
harvest time,
Okay,
yes. And so the grapes have ripened, right? And it's through, I was describing the misty mornings, right? So you need that moisture in the vineyards. And then in the afternoon, the breeze comes in, these light winds, and the light winds kind of stop the development because it can go from noble rot to black rot really quickly.
Yeah.
And, you don't want that to happen because then the grapes are going to be thrown out. One thing about noble rot is, depending on the producer, right? Depending on the rules of the location as well, you can do multiple passes. So they will pick berry by berry. So sometimes 7 passes through a vineyard, going through and just picking the individual grapes themselves and not a full bunch. And that's why wines that have been impacted by noble rot, like the famous wines of Sauterne, right, that we associate with it, also in Austria and Germany and even some parts in the United States as well. This noble rot wines can be very expensive. Now, there are some parts of the world that don't like noble rot. They get it, but they don't like it. So it's also, how do you manage it within the vineyard?
And that's a reminder of how labor intensive this whole thing is and how it ultimately will influence the price of some of these wines that are produced. Just takes a tremendous amount of effort. So we started talking about bubbles. You and I set out to do a couple things. We wanted to feature a sparkling wine here. And we also wanted to hit a rosé. So we've done both. Now, I should mention that the most popular, you told me before showtime, Cremant de Loire is a very famous sparkling bubbly wine. Tell us about it. What's it made out of?
Cremant de Loire, so Cremant de insert region,
yes.
I like to call it, is sparkling wine made in the traditional method using the indigenous grapes of the area. So we're talking about Loire Valley, so we could see Chenin blanc, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc being blended into the sparkling wine. The wines are made using the traditional method, so secondary fermentation occurs in this physical bottle that you're purchasing at the wine store or enjoying in the restaurant, and the wines are aged on the lees during that secondary fermentation for a minimum of 9 months.
Perfect. Good. In today's example, we have I should mention actually, because what we're doing here is tasting something that's kind of analogous or adjacent to a Rosé d'Anjou, right? Which is a very popular sparkling rosé. Again, further plot twist. That's not what we're going with today. We've got a different grape featured in our rosé. What are we drinking?
So we have Grolieu.
Yeah.
Grolleau.
Got it.
And Grolieu is a grape variety that used to be very popular in the Loire Valley, just to make easy drinking rosés.
Was this decades ago? 100 years ago?
Well,
do we know?
I would say decades to...
Okay.
Pre-phylloxera.
Yeah.
We have to think that phylloxera really changed people's planting, right? Because they were looking for what can they sell.
And this was a devastating historical event. Can you tell us a little, like a one-sentence kind of thing?
Phylloxera is a root-eating louse that came from the Americas to Europe and killed vineyards.
Killed the whole deal.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So getting back to this one, so we're drinking Grolieu Noir.
Yes.
Okay. Now, typically, Rosé d'Anjou can be made with other grapes, or typically is, these days, increasingly made with different grapes, yes?
Yes. So Cabernet Franc and Malbec, which is called Cot, C-O-T, in the Loire Valley. Even Cabernet Sauvignon is a grape variety that's approved. While we don't see Cabernet Sauvignon as a single varietal wine from the Loire, it is allowed to be blended in different AOCs.
Okay, let's situate this one. Let's begin tasting. This is this is La Vie en Rose, Domaine du Pas Saint-Martin. $22 bottle of wine here.
$22 bottle of bubbles is great.
Yep.
Approachable. We should be celebrating life every day. So drink bubbles, whether it's water or sparkling water or wine.
Yeah.
But it's very refreshing, great. And all of the wines that we've had so far are so food friendly. And I love bubbles because bubbles, it's like, the carbon dioxide is scrubbing bubbles on your palate. So it can take foods that are rich, also foods that have a lot of flavor to them. And with the rosé, that little bit of strawberry and just a hint of tannin to it as well.
Delicious. It doesn't taste like a Cab Franc kind of rosé, right?
No.
This is a different deal.
This is juicy strawberries.
Yes, exactly.
Like juicy, but not just strawberries, raspberries, like super ripe, middle of the summer. You go to a U-Pick place and you're picking blueberries, strawberries, raspberries right off of the bushes, and they're still warm. Like this is summertime in a glass.
This is a smash hit, guaranteed slam dunk for a party, right?
Oh, yes. And this has a little bit higher sugar content in the dosage. It's not going to be brut, which means that there is some fruity sweetness, but also sweetness within the wine.
That's terrific. Again, so you have seen the bottle on the bottle can. That's a $22 bottle of wine. All right, let's get into the Cab Francs.
Okay.
I've been thinking about this the whole time. Cabernet Franc figures into several different types of wine from the Loire Valley. We're going to be sampling two. Let's start with Chenin. Pretty famous.
Chenin is very famous.
Okay.
A good AOC, if you're looking to experiment with Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley, Chenin produces the most amount of dry red wines for the area. So it's a good place. You'll see it readily available in the market.
How does Cab Franc is not the most popular wine grape in the world, right? And many people may have yet to experience it. Certainly in our audience, right? If you're kind of accustomed to, yes, Cab Franc is made in America, but it's not it's not one of the most preeminent wines that we serve here. But situate Cabernet Franc among some of the other wines that we know. We can compare to Bordeaux, Cabernet Sauvignon, whatever. What kind of wine are we looking at here? You can see through it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
You bring up a really good point.
What?
Is that people might not be familiar with Cabernet Franc, but they've had it before.
Sure have. Where?
And falls under the Bordeaux family of grape varieties, right? And in that Bordeaux family, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec, and Carmenere for the reds, Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon for the whites, and Muscadel. So we'll throw that in there too.
Okay.
But with these, so if someone gets a Bordeaux style blend, or if they're in Bordeaux and they're drinking a red Bordeaux, there is a high probability, especially for wines from the right bank, that they're drinking a wine with Cabernet Franc blended in. Because Cabernet Franc gives that wine a little bit brighter acidity to it. And, in the United States, beautiful Cabernet Franc being produced in the Finger Lakes, as well as on the North Fork of Long Island. And you'll see it too being produced in California, even Oregon and Washington.
I was just going to ask, a little bit cooler climates, right? Seems
Yes.
like a natural fit
And
there.
it's such a perfect grape variety for climates that have climactic conditions, that it's not sunny every day, where it can handle a colder winter, it can handle temperature fluctuations during the summertime. And what we've seen with climate change is historically people said, oh, I don't like to drink Cabernet Franc because it's a green machine, right? You get that pyrazine, that fermented green bell pepper juice, where it's like, oh, no, that's not existing in the world of wine anymore because climate change. But also people are, the growers of the grape variety are much more familiar with what they can do, whether it's leaf pulling to maximize sun exposure. In off years where they need to do that. There's so much more knowledge about growing Cabernet Franc for wine.
My recent exposure to it has told me that it can really benefit from some aging.
Yes.
5 to 10 years changes that green pepper thing quite a bit. In addition to the other characteristics, can you tell me a little bit about the dryness, the tannic properties of it? How might it compare to some of the other wines that we might be familiar with? What does Cab Franc offer that maybe we haven't experienced before? What's unique about it?
So Cabernet Franc is, if we're specifically talking about it in relationship to the Loire Valley,
Sure.
you have acid and you have tannin.
Yep.
And it's that beautiful balance between the two where one is not overpowering another. They are in line with each other. So as you're tasting it, you're being hit with that textural characteristic of the tannin on the palate, the drying sensation, and then you're salivating on the back end. And it's in perfect alignment because there's other grape varieties, right, that you would try that has higher tannin than acid. So you're left with the tannin. But this wine is just perfect, perfectly in balance. And you can, one thing I enjoy about Cabernet Franc is it has the opportunity to pair with some of those foods that you're like, I don't know what to enjoy it with, like asparagus. Asparagus and hollandaise and a good Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley, or white asparagus, because we are in asparagus season.
We are.
Just gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful.
I want to remind our audience who seems to have flatlined out there, please submit some questions. Come on, we have a lot to discuss ourselves. Believe me, we've got enough going on here, but I do want to ask you if you've got some questions to drop them in the chat. Okay, let's get into this one. This is, let's taste this Chenin. This is $32. This is a Philippe Allier, prominent producer, pretty well known.
Well known on the market.
Okay. Yeah. How many players are there in this game? How many different Chinons are there? If you had to speculate or ballpark it.
You know what? I don't think I can answer that question.
Okay, don't.
I know.
That's fine.
And one thing is interesting, looking at it from a very U.S. perspective, there are a lot of producers that don't even make it to the States.
Right.
So you have to go over there to actually experience the wines or go to Paris and see it. And so it's, I would be hard to say. Like Juguet is a very famous producer that I've served many times. And so, yeah.
But tons of small producers coming from this region as well.
Yes. This is, the entire Loire Valley, we're not talking about massive companies coming in.
Right.
These are small family producers, multiple generations. They have a couple hectares and they work really hard on those hectares. And you can, taste their passion for these wines.
I really like Chenin. Let's dig in and see what we got here.
Well, should we pick them up and compare them side by side?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So let's look at them.
So if you're looking at the color, the Chenin is a little bit darker in color, has more color intensity, but both of them are very much in that fuchsia, ruby red spectrum, fading to a pink rim. And then you have the Chenin, right? A little bit, I smell it and I just picture more concentrated, more earthy notes, not dried fruit as in the grapes were left on the vines for too long, so they started to raisinate, but there is a darker concentration in this wine. Compared to the Bourgogne is juicy. It's so different.
It's really different.
And one thing that kind of commonly in terms of winemaking with Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley is we don't talk about new oak. New oak is not really a thing. There are some producers playing around with it, but we're looking at neutral oak. So really what you're getting in the glass is maybe some extended maceration, just kind of the winemaking, the aroma of the grape itself.
So just to back up a little bit and put this in the larger educational context, right? So Chenin requires new oak.
No.
Oh, it does not.
No. So we don't see new oak.
Oh, my bad.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Which is different than the Cabernet Franc from Bordeaux or Cabernet Franc from California,
Got it. Okay.
where we would see new oak. We would get those vanilla caramel butterscotch characteristics in the wine from that, whereas here, this is very much the fruit, fruit itself.
Got it. Okay. Now I get it. This is the Chenin. I drank that one. I was going to save that up.
So you drank it. What do you like about it? What attracts you? And this is what's exciting is just talk about it from the heart.
It's I think you zoned in on something that the relative it downplays the fruitiness kind of thing, right? So if we were to get into other language to describe it, I've heard things like forest floor, things along those lines. It's dark, it's deep, it's quite dry, pretty astringent, right? Like that's seriously going on. I don't really experience the green pepper kind of thing too heavily within this one.
No.
Sometimes it's right there. Not in this case. What do you get from it?
Well, I love again, kind of going back to that balance of tannin and acid.
Yeah.
While I was hit initially with the tannin, it was like, woo,
It's huge.
textural wake up.
Yep.
But now it's gone. It's dissipated. And the dark cherry, like a very dark concentrated cherry note in it. And yes, there is some earthiness to this wine, kind of violets, almost tea-like.
Yeah.
Kind of, I wouldn't say bergamot, but like an Earl Grey type tea note.
Yeah.
But it just has such beautiful balance to it.
That's a really cool wine. And, experiencing the nose of these two side by side, very different wines. So it'll be interesting to see what we taste in the second one.
Yes.
Let's give it a shot.
The
Go ahead.
second one is Bourgogne. And there are, you can experience differences going from AOC to AOC. But you can also find so many differences amongst producers within the different AOCs. We have in the Loire Valley, there are many producers who like to categorize their wines as natural wines. So you can find some that have a little bit of Brettanomyces on them. And, so you can do some research beforehand.
Tell us about Brett and Brettanomyces. And
Brettanomyces is it's a bacteria that we commonly associate with some types of beers, and in some wines. It can be considered a fault, but it can also be considered pleasurable by different producers and different people.
So sometimes we experience that in natural wine, right? Funky Town USA kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
Is that what is the main ingredient for that kind of thing?
Yes. Brettanomyces would be considered part of, and there are clean natural wines as well,
Sure,
right? Natural wines, there is no written definition
Right.
to them. But there are producers within different Loire Valley Cabernet Franc AOCs that do produce some wines with Brett and Sweaty Horse.
Okay, Sweaty Horse. There you
Sweaty
go.
Horse,
Barnyard, etc.
or Band-Aid, like
Band-Aid.
the adhesive bandage back in the days when they were rubber and you smelled them open the metal box.
Totally fine with that.
I still have one of those metal boxes because it actually you can get it in wines.
Oh my God. Okay, so a little context. The Chenin was retails for around 32 here in Ithaca. The Bourgogne is 22, right?
But
so considerably
totally
cheaper. Same, generally for the most part, similar wine.
Similar wine, but the Bourgogne. The Bourgogne is just juicy.
Yep.
It is juicy fruit, where the tannin does not hit you up front.
No.
And while it is very well balanced, the tannin is less. The acid is not perceived as high, right? Because you don't have that come in and then have the acid cleanse away. Whereas this, it just kind of moves as one unit, which is beautiful. Looking at these two wines, I would definitely age the Chenin, as you mentioned, like they can use age. This one, this specific Chenin would be beautiful in 5 years, right? That tannin would soften out, but still have the lift from the acidity when you enjoy it. Whereas this Bourgogne, this particular producer, this style of winemaking from this producer, I would say drink it now. You could even put a little chill on it for summertime.
I would too. So let's talk about the relative fruitiness of the Bourgogne versus the Chenin. Different experience. Not as dark, less ripe or less even dried fruit kind of thing going on. How do you talk about that?
It's, this is like a dark cherry. The Chenin is a very much dark cherry. That's why immediately an image that popped into my head was like dark kind of essence colors.
Like it looks.
Whereas this one was
Yes.
just really popped in your mouth. And I don't want to say Jolly Rancher, but it has this candied fruit-like note, but it is dry. I mean, it is a dry wine.
Yeah.
A dry red.
And to think about this too, these vineyards are just miles apart. But wow, a chasm in the comparative experience of those two.
Exactly. And, you know, as you're moving through the Loire Valley, right, you have these hills. And so certain aspects of vineyards might get more sun exposure than others.
Yeah.
And what you'll find is as you progress through your journey and you say, oh, wow, I really like the wines from this producer. A producer can produce multiple wines from the same AOC. So look for terminology on the label that might indicate the soil, right? Or the name of this blend or cuvee that they have, because 100% of their vineyards are in the AOC. So they can't call it something else. So it would be Chenin AOC and then kind of a something special, right? That differentiates this one Chenin from the same producer from another within that same producer.
In your courses, there's a tasting component. How does it play out? What is the experience like for the student? What would the student experience be like for what we've just done here?
In the Introduction to Wines course, they would only be getting one Cabernet Franc. So I would talk about the different styles that are produced. Sometimes I've done a rosé Chenin compared to a red Chenin by the same producer, so they can get experience that. But within the Cornell courses, especially in the experiencing, the second course of each country, you know, there the students are actually selecting wines that they will then share with others and describe and talk about, and even practice some food and wine pairing as well.
So these people are in a cohort, right? Sharing experiences and notes, which has got to be, well, I've done it. I've taken some of these online courses. That's a huge part of the course. And I'm sure, well, you host, or rather you're the instructor. In person. This isn't always common, right? Somebody that's usually a faculty author. You're right there with all of your students, or at least you launch.
I do. No. Actually, I love teaching, being the facilitator on the Cornell courses, because to me, it's a way to connect with others and just sharing my passion for wine with others. And one thing with the events for the experiencing courses is they're, you know, talking within, I call them wine chats, where we come together and people can bring a glass of wine and food, and we kind of talk about it. But then they're also sharing their knowledge with their friends and family and others to be able to feel confident about their knowledge, but also practicing it in a way.
Yeah, and I like that you use the term wine journey, because it's never ending. You're always on your way. There's always so much to learn. I mean, you know, I'm pretty relatively early on in my wine journey, and I love learning from you and some of the resources you provided. We have a question from Amy who checks in.
Sure.
The actual bottles you're tasting today, have they been aged at all, or are they all basically right off the shelf? Now, I should mention, these are all 22s and 23s. Why are we drinking 22s and 23s? Is that what's available to us? How does this work out from a buyer's experience kind of standpoint, and the growers? When did they release what? How does it work?
So these wines are all pretty much current release.
Yep.
We can see some 24s hitting the market
in the spring,
May-ish. And we'll talk a little bit about why there might be a delay in some and a little bit in a little later. But these are current releases. Now, what some producers and some importers have done is hold back for the higher end, kind of the tête de cuvées, the top wines of different producers, hold back in inventory, or the producers themselves don't release them until after they've had more age to them. So, for example, Chateau d'Ypres in Sauvignon, in 2021, their current release was 2016 of their white wine.
Right. Oh, let's talk about the whites. We didn't talk about the aging or cellar potential of any of those. What do you do with those two, the Chenin Blanc and the Sauvignon Blanc?
Well, and this is where it comes into different producers having different wines
Yes.
within their production. The entry level wines like we're tasting today, you could drink those now. You could drink them in 3 years.
Okay.
They're much more meant to be consumed young. But with that said, there are other wines produced like the sweet wines, maybe some of the higher end, right, within the portfolio of the producer, definitely have ability to age.
Okay, let's talk big picture industry kind of stuff. Are there misconceptions about Loire Valley wines that you'd like to dispel or smash through?
That Vouvray and Chenin Blancs are always sweet.
Yeah.
No. They're not always sweet. And they come in so many different styles. You might pick up a bottle and say, oh, this wine is sweet. Well, okay, so you just happen to pick up that one. Don't write off Chenin Blanc just for that one wine that you tried. Definitely try palate mileage. And I love the Sancerre is a great variety. But it is Sauvignon Blanc.
We talked about before we got going here how to get a handle on this. This region has a vast array of wines and appellations and grape varietals going on. Any tips on how to get started and how to get your head around all this? I mean, we've hit some of the classic hits here, but what would be good entry level, wines to start trying? What would you recommend? Where do you take off?
You just got to start. You have to put your toe, dip your toe in the pool, and just dive right in.
Yeah.
Starting off with Vouvray for Chenin Blanc because it is the most widely produced. So that means you can find many different producers in the markets at different price points. So depending on what you want to pay for the bottle, there is going to be a wine for you. And starting off with Chinon for Cabernet Franc. Now, for the Eastern Loire Valley, because of the popularity of Sancerre, looking at some of those other AOCs, like Manitou Salon that we had here, perfect. I mean, that's the AOC that I served in wines class this semester. And looking at, I mentioned that IGP Val de Loire for Sauvignon Blanc as well. And there, at that level, at the IGP level, you will see Sauvignon Blanc oftentimes on the label. They're allowed to list the grape variety if there's a minimum of 85%.
I want to get into cost a little bit because we were reflecting on our 4 previous wine tastings together, and we had wines from $7 up to $55, right? All of these were within the 20 or 30 range. Any bargains, any good deals to be had? Presumably you'd have to get into the IGP level, not AOC level wines. Tell me more.
Yeah, or some of the smaller AOCs.
Yeah.
In a way, like Bourgogne.
Okay.
That we had tried.
Yep.
Now, I do have to say there are some Chinon producers that are less expensive. And looking to, if you'd like to try another example of a high acid white wine, Muscadet, which we didn't really talk about, but that's in the far western part of the region of the larger valley, Loire Valley. They're, those $18 to $22 per bottle. But it is its own grape, though. So that's different than the wines that we tried.
Amy just hits up with a follow-up, but along those lines, are there particular years that are outstanding for the region? Any years that jump out at us within the last 5 or 10? 2015-ish was good or somewhere around there, right?
Yes.
Mid-teens.
The mid-teens. 2023 was good. I'm trying to think. So you have. With the craziness of climate change and the heat spikes, right? It might have been warm in the summertime, but like 2020. 2020 you also had some hail and moisture issues. Well, we'll say 2019, right? That first time of like, whoa, it's super hot here, and extending that. Looking for, it might have been hot in the summertime and then kind of mellowed out during harvest season. Kind of like a good brisket. You want it low and slow at the end.
There you go. Perfect. The elephant in the room. wine prices and tariffs. What can we anticipate happening? You've been reading the trades, presumably. What can our wine consumers, those who want to begin their Loire Valley journey, will these? I don't think we're going to see these $22 to $32 price tags on these. What's going to happen?
Correct. With the wines from the European Union, at least in the United States, for those viewers and listeners that are in the U.S., we will see a 20% tariff on the wines. It's being talked about of, is that all that 100% of that 20% going to be passed on to the consumer? Are some of the producers, right, importers, because we have the 3-tier distribution system and there's multiple levels, can each tier take away a percentage point or two, so it doesn't impact the final price? It's too early to say that, but something that just want to let some people know is the 2024 releases or shelves might have a brief period of being empty because importers, when the 200% tariff was being discussed, importers actually stopped importing. They had wines that were slated to be released, but they weren't sure. They could not handle a 200% tariff. And so there could be a pause of, a couple of months on some of these wines being available.
And this took the form of some high drama events going on, right? Boats are loaded over in Europe. Don't send it over. We're not going to do this, right? Or turning around shipping containers.
Yes.
Full of wines. A lot of people are going to struggle, certainly on the production side, but also on the consumer side. Everybody loses.
Yes. And these are not massive corporations.
No.
These are small family operators that, the U.S. is the largest market for wine. And U.S. wines, while we make phenomenal wines here, they're different in style. We have different climatic conditions. And we also consume a lot in the United States, and it's, the U.S. market cannot handle 100% of our consumption.
I want to talk to the audience really quickly. So for those of you who are just getting into our wine keynotes and our podcasts, this is just the start of your Cornell wine journey. We're going to share a couple of the YouTube videos, recordings of some of the events we did in the past. Really cool. And some of the themes we touched on today were further fleshed out in some of those previous events as well. We also produce a podcast. It's called Cornell Keynotes. That's available to you as well. So you can listen to those on the YouTube channel, where we're going to point you to check out some of these recordings. You could check out our site, our EDU site, Cornell Keynotes from eCornell. In addition to some other outlets, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can get these: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the top 5, etc. Right? So I just want to encourage you, if you're into this kind of thing, check out some of the previous recordings we've done. Cheryl Stanley, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you in here today.
Thank you, Chris.
Always fun. Thank you, viewers. We'll see you next time. Amy, thanks for your question. And we'll see you on the next Cornell Keynotes. Thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon or evening.